we in? So on that note, Dr. Kenneth Fetter is here to talk about about, losing my notes, sorry, Ancient America, a time trek. And he also has written a book, which sounds very interesting, Ancient America, 50 archaeological sites to see for yourself. So Dr. Fetter, take it away if you would.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Thank you so very much for inviting me. I'm pretty good at this, but I end up looking at my face instead of the camera lens. So that may look a little bit strange. Let me tell you how my day's gone. I shaved this morning, and I tend to keep razors longer than I should. And so I sliced my chin really badly and forgot that until about 5 minutes ago, I had this huge Band-Aid on my chin. That would have been embarrassing, right? But even more embarrassing is that I was waiting to start here, and I was upstairs. My wife was in another room, and I'm chatting with her on the, I'm texting her because she's in another room. Only I realized that with her, it's with Paula. And so I told Paula, number one, that Alex Verdugo for the Boston Red Sox has a full beard. And then the last thing I thought my wife, but I was telling Paula, was that I love her. You can imagine how embarrassing that is. I know. Paula's a perfectly nice person, I'm sure, but I bet you she was a little surprised by that. Anyway, again, thanks so much for inviting me. I think that the first thing I should do, though, is and this is not just a recognize that all the places that I'm going to talk about today and all the places I talk book, rock shelters and rock art and cliff dwellings and mounds and effigies to acknowledge are the product of the genius and creativity of America's first people, of Native Americans. So think about what these marvelous places are like and trying to encourage people to go and visit them. So with that in mind, what I'd like to do is I'm going to share my screen, and let's hope that this works. Okay. So share. And correct me if I'm wrong, but are you all looking at a picture of Montezuma Castle?
Yes, we are.
Yes.
Fantastic, fantastic. Now, with that in the background, bear this in mind. You've all been to high school graduations and college graduations where a student, a valedictorian, a salutatorian, a student speaker acknowledges the role a particular professor played in their development as scholars, inspired them to go into a particular profession or inspired them to become scientists, whatever. What you don't hear very often, though, and this should happen, are professors or teachers acknowledging that students played a similar role for them, that a student question or a student comment inspired them to initiate a project or conduct a project. And that's exactly the case with my 50 Sites project. A little background. In 2008, I teach an introductory course in archaeology. It's a general education course. It's 100 students every semester, and the vast majority of them are not anthropology majors. They're not going into archaeology. They may never take another archaeology course. They're getting general education credit. And that's great. That's fine. And I like reeling them in with all these spectacular sites. So in 2008, I received a letter, an actual physical letter from a student who had been in that class 4 years previously, so 2004. And starts the letter by saying, "Dear Dr. Fader, you won't remember me." And I looked at the name, and he's absolutely right. I did not remember him. And I didn't do very well in your class, so I checked my student records, and, he had been a C student. He wasn't spectacular. But he went out of the letter to say, "But, I really enjoyed your class. I was a business major, had a lot of stuff going on." He's a non-traditional student. He had already been married and had a child by the time he was in my class. So he had a busy schedule, didn't have the time to focus on my class. But 4 years after the fact, he was reaching out to me to tell me how much he enjoyed the class, especially the pictures I showed of archaeological sites, especially in the United States, as examples, or using them as a way of teaching about tree ring dating or radiocarbon dating or settlement pattern, on and on and on. And I thought that was really nice of him to take the time. 4 years later, professors always love that when students reach out to us after the fact to tell us how the class inspired them or opened their eyes, widened their horizons. And that's what this guy was saying to me. And if that's all it was, it would have been great. But he goes on to say, and you know, Dr. Fader, result of the pictures you showed in class, I decided that if I ever have the opportunity, I want to see some of those spectacular sites you talked about. And then he tells me that he, his wife, and now 2 kids, a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, had recently traveled to the Southwest. They had flown into Phoenix, rented a car, and they were going to drive north to the Grand Canyon, which is kind of typical. On the trip, this is him telling me this in the letter, on the trip north on I-17, the interstate, they see a sign that says Montezuma Castle. And he says to me, I turned to my wife and said, that rings a bell. That site is one that this crazy professor that I had, I always end up being the crazy professor in people's memories, and I take credit for that. That crazy professor I had showed pictures of this, and it's like this castle, and it's up in the air, and it's in a cliff. He says to me in the letter, do you mind if we stop? You know, we don't have a specific deadline or time or specific schedule. And he says to me in the letter, yeah, my wife said, yeah, sure, the kids can run around. It'll be great. So we get off the highway. And just as I remember you saying, it's a really short trip off the highway to Montezuma Castle. And we got there, we went through the museum, we took the hike. And now what you folks are looking at right now is this amazing image. Here's a little bit of a closer picture, closer shot of Montezuma Castle. It is a 17 or 18 room pueblo, 90 feet off of the surface of the ground there, which is right against Beaver Creek. It's curved to match the actual outline of the cliff. It's got very few windows for protection, for insulation. It's a marvelous place. And he's telling me that, oh yeah, we had a great time. I can't thank you enough. I would never have stopped to see this had I not taken your class. Again, if that was all he said, it would have been spectacular. But he says more. He says, after we were done and the kids are running around, all had a great time. The 1-year-old ran around, it was fun. We get back in the car, and as I'm backing out of the parking lot, this is him saying this, my 4-year-old says to me, Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be an archaeologist. Oh my God. You know, one of the problems that professors have sometimes is because students are very busy and maybe they're not majoring in the discipline that you're teaching. And you might not get the impression that they're really listening to you or that you're having an impact on their lives. But here in this one letter, I have this very clear indication that not only do I affect the generation of students who are in my class, I'm having a multi-generational effect. Their children are being exposed to archaeology because of something that I did in class. And so the children of people who are in my class have gained an interest in archaeology. That's like the best thing ever that's ever happened to me in terms of students reaching out to me after the fact. But here's the deal. You know, that gave me this idea. I said, well, first thing, if a student like this guy, who was not a major, was so impressed by these sites, then maybe what I ought to do is, even in an introductory class where I'm talking about archaeological methods, maybe I ought to add more of that, more of sites that you can see for yourself that show as our object lessons in how archaeologists do their work. But the sites at the same time are like remarkable and amazing to see. So I actually changed the content of that course on the basis of this guy's letter. And instead of it being kind of hit and miss throughout the class, I devote a third of the semester to, all right, here are the kinds of places that archaeologists have examined, have studied, have explained on the basis of archaeological methods. And now that point in the class, you know about those methods, and now we're going to apply them to these places that are amazing to see, but also you can visit for yourself. So I changed the class. But then I thought, all right, so I can affect those 100 kids every semester. But what about casting my net more broadly? What if I were to take, oh, I don't know, 50 is a good round number, 50 of those sites and put them together in a guide and write a book in which all that archaeology that I do in my class gets focused on encouraging people. It's trying to inspire people to go and see the archaeology that is literally right in their own backyards. You don't need a passport. Maybe you need an airplane to get there. And these would be sites that are amazing to see, that are important in terms of archaeology, important in terms of a time period or a particular culture. Again, showing the creative genius of America's first people, and being gobsmackingly amazing. Gobsmack is my Englishism that I like the best in the world. It says you see a site like Montezuma Castle, and you're gobsmacked. You're like, it's like a cold splash of water in your face. And you realize, wow, this is an amazing place. I want to know more about it. And it's old, and yet it reflects amazing engineering or architectural or mathematical or calendrical skills or observational skills. And I'm going to show some of those in this lecture. So I put together this book proposal and I started sending it around. And man, I got a lot of people patting me on the head saying, oh, what an interesting idea. We don't think you'll sell a lot of copies of that book, so we're not interested. And it really was kind of a last-ditch effort. I reached out to Rowman and Littlefield, which is a great press, a great publisher. And I sent the prospectus to them blind, not expecting very much. And Leanne Silverman, who at the time was, and I owe an enormous debt of gratitude to her, she responded very positively to my proposal. And soon thereafter, I had a contract, finished the book relatively quickly. And it's been out since 2016, 2017. It's now in paperback. I will try to remember to send Paula or send somebody a 30% discount if you buy directly from the publisher, which is a big chunk off if you're interested in buying the book. I'm a terrible salesperson, but there may be people who are interested in looking at some of these sites. Montezuma Castle is in fact one of the sites in the book. And I literally walk you through the place, give you a little history, show lots of nice photographs, some color, and try to explain why this site is so important in terms of the history of the United States, whether you're a native person or not a native person. So let me now go on and talk about some of the sites, and I'll even try to hit one that's a lot nearer to you than most of these. All right, there's the cover of the book. That's a site in the Southwest, a place called Tuzugoot, this 500-room pueblo, 1,000 years old, very impressive. Most of the sites in ancient America are national parks, national monuments, state parks, state monuments. And there even is one on private property where the landowner allows, it just has it open for people to take, maintains trails, fantastic site. Also highlighted in the book. This gives you, there's a map showing you the spread of the 50 sites. And yep, if you're looking at, well, there's nothing in Nebraska or Kansas, there is plenty of West, the Great Plains, the kinds of sites that are open to the public where a non-professional, non-archaeologist would see it and be immediately impressed by it. I went for sites that are visually impressive. So we have a lot of sites in the East and the Midwest, a lot of sites in the Southwest. And yes, there are sites in Wyoming, sites in California, and one site right on the border of Washington and Oregon. And I'll make sure to cover that today. Now I'm going to start on my part of the country. This is a map of the United States, 1784. The arrow, you notice how that arrow is pointing to that really narrow band of land? I don't know if you can see it, but that band of land is called Connecticut. Now, I live in Connecticut, and I know where Connecticut is. It's in New England. That's the Western Reserve. After the Revolutionary War, this band of land was considered to be the western part of Connecticut. And if you served in the Revolutionary War, you lived in Massachusetts or Connecticut or Rhode Island, you could go to that narrow band of land that's now Ohio and Indiana and Illinois, and you could claim property there. If it was getting too crowded in New England, you could go out there. And one of the towns that was established is Marietta, Ohio. You go to Marietta, Ohio, it looks like there's a village green, there's a private prep school. It all looks very much like New England because it was established by New Englanders. And in Marietta, when those New Englanders arrived, they found a large burial mound, which turns out to be close to 1,000 years old, maybe 2,000 years old. And so often in cases where these mounds are being found in the Midwest, Native Americans had built them. The mounds were viewed as a hindrance. They were plowed out of the way. They were farmed over. But here in Marietta, when some New England immigrants dug into the top of the mound, they found human remains. And instead of digging it up, thought, well, this is sacred land. This is a burial ground. Instead of digging it up for farmland, which we don't have to do, we're going to make it our sacred ground as well. And they actually built an 18th century cemetery, 18th and 19th century cemetery around the burial mound and left the burial mound intact. So what you're looking at is Mound Cemetery with the mound in the background there. I'll show you close-ups of it. And all those gravestones date to, most of them date to the late 18th and early 19th centuries. This is an engraving from the time, and you can see here that there's the mound in the middle, the burial mound, 2,000 years old, and there are the gravestones right there in the foreground. And most of these stones are stones that you would expect to find here in New England. So there's the one on the left, the large one, sacred to the memory of Elizabeth Minor. She was born in Newport, Rhode Island. You can see there on the right-hand photograph, there's a fellow born in Berlin, Connecticut. Yes, it's not Berlin, Connecticut, it's Berlin, Connecticut. And most of these stones indicate that the people came from Connecticut or Rhode Island or Massachusetts, and they arrived here, their families arrived here at the very after the Revolutionary War when this land was opened up to them. I just love this picture, this juxtaposition of an ancient sacred burial mound and more modern, not as old, sacred burials as well, from two different cultures, showing the respect that they had for the older culture. By the way, that site is in the middle of a neighborhood. That cemetery, it's open to the public. There's no charge, and you just, as long as it's during the day, you walk in, walk around. It's a really special place. Also in Ohio is Serpent Mound. Serpent Mound is an effigy mound. That is a mound of earth in the shape of a snake. And from the tip of the tail of that snake to the very end of it, in the upper left, is now 1,350 feet. The snake itself, the snake's body is maybe 6, 7, 8 feet tall. It's a huge amount of work, and the individual coils of the snake seem to be astronomically aligned, so that on this ridge, this amazing effigy being in the shape of this animal, a snake, built by folks probably sometime between 500 and 1,000 years ago. Now they've built a fire tower, so you can climb up the fire tower and look down at the snake, its sinuous body rolling down that hill. Now you go to Etowah, Georgia, and you find a different kind of mound. The cemetery mound is a burial mound, 2,000 years old. The serpent mound is an effigy. It's in the form of a snake. There are bears in Iowa. There are thunderbird effigies. But here in the American Southeast are these large temple mounds, because we know archaeologically that there were wooden temples placed on the top of those. And based on actual historical references, Spanish came in here in the 16th century and talked about these Indian cities where the chiefs, the leaders, the rulers had their domiciles on top of these mounds. De Soto's people wrote about these places, and they actually have visited Etowah itself. So they may have been in Etowah. A site like Etowah may have had 5,000 people living there. This is more like a little less than 1,000 years ago. And it was part of a large civilization of mound builders who had spectacular pottery, had enormous trading networks. And I have pictures of some of the artifacts that are just mind-blowing. Those are both about 3 feet tall, and they're carved out of marble. And this is in the Etowah site. These were found in Etowah. And we see these 2 people cross-legged, one on her knees, and with makeup on, with a hairdo, some kind of a hat, and the paint showing probably what their clothing looked like. And to be in the presence of objects like this just belies all the stereotypes of Native people being primitive. These were sophisticated artists. These are absolutely spectacular. They are about 3 inches across. They are called gorgets, and they probably were used as amulets. Those are shells. They are carved with a flint tool. So a stone tool is carving those, etching them, and then a dark pigment is pushed into the stone, into the bone, the shell, and then wiped off the front so that it adheres into all of the etchings. And those appear to be warriors. They're holding weapons. They have what appears to be a cape made of feathers, and they even have a mask that looks like a raptor or a bird. It's possible these were intended as chimeras, that is half person, half eagle, or they just are warriors who are dressed up as eagles as they are performing some ritual. They're absolutely stunning artifacts. Again, this reflection of the great artistic achievement of the Native people of the New World. Cahokia Mound State Park is in Illinois. It's on the verge, I think, of becoming a national park. It is the largest single site population-wise of any Native American site. We're looking at AD 1400. The population of Cahokia was at least 10,000. It may have been 30,000 people. The reason those numbers are important is that in the Middle East, when they look at the oldest cities, the ones that date to the Old Testament of the Bible, the cutoff line is usually 10,000 people. If you have 10,000 people in a compressed area, that's a city. Cahokia was, by that definition, a city. You're looking at Monk's Mound, which is 100 feet tall, covers 14 acres. It's a platform mound. There's evidence of a great residence on the top of that mound. The ruler, the king, the prince of Cahokia. Cahokia is not what it was called by the people who lived there. Cahokia is the name of the local town. It's actually in Collinsville, Illinois. This is not my photograph. It's an aerial shot. It's a multi-tiered mound. It's called Monk's Mound because in the 18th century, a bunch of monks built a monastery on top of one of those ridges of the mounds. So all that is artificial. What you're looking at is a mound built by people. The stairway is recent. That was added to allow people easy access to the top. And this is what you see from the top. You're looking west across the Mississippi River into St. Louis. And there's the Great Arch. The St. Louis Cardinals tomorrow will be defeated by the Los Angeles Dodgers in Los Angeles, but that's another story. This is a great museum there. And this is a little display showing the great size of Monk's Mound, which is in the middle. On the left is the temple of the Temple of the Sun at Teotihuacan, which is in Mexico. Spectacular pre-Aztec site. And the pyramid on the right, that brownish one, is the Great Pyramid of Cheops in Egypt. So what Native people were constructing in the confines of the United States are certainly on the level of what folks were doing in other parts of the world, folks that we consider civilized. Well, of course, so are these Native people. Sophisticated, civilized. This is an artist's conception of what Cahokia may have looked like at its peak. There's kind of a central city there with Monk's Mound and a bunch of homes of the elites, of the rulers, and then the second tier of people outside of that, and then a surrounding area filled with farmers whose produce all went to support the rulers of Cahokia. And the artifacts in the museum, the Birdman artifact is beautiful. This sculpture of a mother nursing her baby. This is all sophisticated art. I love this. It's an effigy bowl. It's a beaver made into a pot, whose back is a pot. This is a map of Mount 72 at Cahokia. This is the equivalent of a burial of a pharaoh, of the Chinese emperor of Anyang, the Shang dynasty. There are the one in blue there is a young man, a man in his probably 20s, 30s, maybe 40s, and he is surrounded by all of these other folks. The majority of these other folks were sacrificed. These are sacrifice victims who have either had their heads cut off or their hands and feet cut off. The large pile in the center there is actually over 50 young women, all between the ages of like 16 and 25. So whether those are consorts or his helpers or whatever they are, obviously the person who is highlighted in blue was the equivalent of a pharaoh or an emperor or a prince. And again, this is all right outside of St. Louis 500 years ago. A fantastic site with a great museum. This is not a dead body. This is a wax figure of the person buried in Mount 72 with thousands of shell beads, over 1,000 spear points in that one burial, pieces of copper, pieces of mica traded in from everywhere. Cahokia was the central hub. It was the capital of a far-ranging empire up and down the Mississippi River. Again, more than 500, 600 years ago. Now let's move further to the southwest, where we have Chaco Canyon. Just had a good friend who is right in Chaco Canyon right now, and I'm so jealous. I haven't been there in a while. Chaco is a national park, a little bit difficult to get to because there's no paved road to it, which is good and bad. I mean, it keeps the number of tourists there at any one time low. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but places like Arches National Park and Bryce Canyon in Utah have had, since COVID has kind of lessened, have had huge increases in visitation, meaning you get to Arches at 10 o'clock in the morning and the doors were already shut. No, come back later because we have a full complement of people in there. That doesn't happen in Chaco because Chaco requires a 15, 20-mile drive on a dirt road, which is not terrible, but not some people's in some people's comfort zone. There are more than a dozen great houses at Chaco. Chaco was a very important and special place. And these great houses are these large, multi-story, multi-room pueblos. And the largest of which is the one with the arrows pointing to Pueblo Benito, beautiful house. And Pueblo Benito, this is an artist's drawing, obvious map of it from the top. The circular structures are kivas. Those are the places of worship. And we know that from ethno-history. We know when Spaniards came to this area, the native people were still, and today still are, using kivas as their churches, their places of worship. There are maybe 800 rooms at Chaco. There are multiple stories. There are arguments about what the population was. Was this mostly ceremonial? Were there a few thousand people there? And that's something I will leave to the experts. I just got a notice that my internet connection is unstable. I hope you are seeing and hearing all of this. This is Chaco Canyon from above down onto it, a D-shaped pueblo, absolutely beautiful, and you are allowed to walk through the pueblo. This is a beautifully rendered artist's conception. The picture I took was from behind it, looking down from that bluff. And now you're looking in the other direction at a reconstruction of the site. It's just absolutely magnificent architecture. And it must have been a busy hive of activity when people were there. And you can see smoke curling out of the kivas. And a lot of those rooms are for storage, but some of those rooms may have been inhabited as well. This is a little bit different part of Chaco. You go to houses, but if you walk, it's a thirds of the canyon off to the north. you come to this a magnificent rock art panel. And I know you guys were mentioning some rock art stuff. Well, there's great rock art in Chaco. And this is one of the most, I don't know that it's the most beautiful piece of rock art I've ever seen, but it may be the most evocative. So you're looking at a cliff, and you may see a little sign there towards the bottom. And right there, it's directing you to a piece of rock art that's called the supernova pictograph. It is believed that about 1,000 years ago, the people of Chaco would have been able to see the Crab Nebula become a supernova. You can go out the night sky, winter anyway, and see a little fuzzy patch in above Orion that is the remnant of this supernova that actually blew up in about 1064, AD 1064. Now we know when it blew up for a reason I'll talk about in a little bit. What you're looking at here, that's a ceiling. So you're looking straight up. Your back is to the wall, and it looks like a crescent, a star, and a hand. Now, the modern Hopi, who are the direct descendants of the people who built Chaco, will tell you that where you see a hand image in their culture, what that means is something important happened at this spot. We think we know what that important thing was. That's what the Crab Nebula looks like today. On July 4th, 1054 AD, that's when this very bright spot in the sky exploded. We believe that it was visible in the night sky and was as bright as a quarter moon, and it was even visible during the day. So that's something that certainly people who had good observational skills would have noticed that wasn't there before. The Chinese astronomers wrote about it. I cannot pronounce the Chinese, but in the first year of the period, Chiho, the fifth moon, the day Chichu, a guest star appeared approximately several inches southeast of Dian Quan, which today is Zeta Tauri. After more than a year, it gradually. The place is right. That's Crab Nebula becoming this becoming form. That's that star becoming going supernova. It would have been visible from Chaco. Now that is an image, computer image of what it looked like the day that supernova was first visible in the sky. So there you'll notice the crescent moon with the crescent at the bottom, with that arrow on the right pointing to where Zeta Tauri is located. And you look at that map and you look at the rock art and you see a crescent moon, you see the star. And maybe the Hopi there are telling us, the ancient Puebloans are telling us, we saw something really important here and we are memorializing it forever, which is just astonishing that you can go back in time nearly 1,000 years and put yourself at that spot and imagine what it must have been like for the astronomers at Chaco when they saw that in the sky. Remarkable place. Canyon de Chelly is one of my favorite spots, and it's also one that's administered both by the National Park Service and the Navajo tribe. So when you go there, the rangers are Navajo. The people giving you tours of Canyon de Chelly are Navajo. You're looking at that rock formation in the foreground is Spider Woman. It's an absolutely spectacular place, and you can go down into the canyon. One of the pueblos is open to the public, and the Navajo will give you personal guides into the canyon, and I highly recommend that. If you ever have a chance to go there, hire a guide. This guy, Drew Harris, was just amazing. He told us that the Navajo today are like the representatives of their ancestors, and so they want to share this place with people who aren't necessarily Navajo. And so there are these amazing cliff dwellings scattered throughout, built probably not by the ancestors of Navajo, but by the ancestors of the Hopi. But this is Navajo Reservation today. Massacre Cave, which is a place where today the Navajo will tell you more than 100 women and children were killed by Spanish conquistadors. Bullet holes are still on that cave surface. And in the 18th century, 19th century, a Native American who had escaped the massacre, came back and painted this pictograph representing the Spaniards. And you can see the guy there with the cape, so he's a priest, and these other Spaniards riding horses, which the Navajo didn't have, with spears, with hats that the Navajo didn't have. So he's depicting that invasion on the part of the Spanish. So it's history and rock art at the same time. Can't talk about 50 sites without mentioning Mesa Verde, which is in Colorado, one of the most spectacular archaeological sites in the world. Mesa Verde, Chaco Canyon, Poverty Point in Louisiana, and Cahokia, those 4 sites out of my 50 are not only incredibly important sites in the United States, they are incredibly important worldwide. They are on the World Heritage Register held by the United Nations. So they're on the same list with the pyramids of Egypt and the Taj Mahal. Really pretty cool. This is Square Tower House. At some point, I'd love to be able to tour Square Tower House. It's open only intermittently by ranger-led tours. And this is Cliff Palace, one of the most remarkable of the cliff dwellings. The mesas at Mesa Verde, there's Chapin Mesa and the Wetherill family is like the Cartwrights. They owned a big ranch in southwestern Colorado, and discover Mesa Verde. They were told about it by a local native person who said, "We don't go down in there, it's haunted, there are ghosts of the ancestors there." And it was then by chance, a couple of the Wetherills were looking for some cattle who had gotten loose, and the Wetherills went down into it and described their discovery, that wasn't really a discovery at all, of Cliff Palace. And they actually opened it up for tourist trade. What's really interesting is that the Wetherills for years tried to get the federal government to acknowledge this place, maybe buy it, and keep it as an archaeological preserve. They had very little luck. It was in fact 2 women who politicked and pushed and pushed and pushed and ended up getting national park status for Mesa Verde, which is why Mesa Verde is called the women's park, because it was the work of women, Colorado women, and it today is probably one of the most popular of the archaeological sites in a national park or national monument that's open to the public. And yep, ranger-led tours bring you right down into it, keeping the numbers low. And there's nothing like, Cliff Palace is relatively easy, a couple of ladders. You don't have to worry about heights. Some of the places are a little bit more challenging to get into if you have a fear of heights, but Cliff Palace, highly recommended for everybody to get that kind of up close, personal perspective. And there it is, sun shining down on it. One of the programs they used to do, I don't know they do it anymore, is they had a reenactor play the role of one of the Wetherill brothers. And the fiction is that it's the late 19th century, which is when the Wetherills opened the place up for tourism. And he play acts as one of the Wetherills, and the fiction is that you are visiting in the 19th century. And he gets to read letters, copies of letters that the Wetherills had actually sent to New York to let people know in New York, hey, there's a spectacular place, you really ought to come and visit it. This is in New Mexico. This was not, Three Rivers Petroglyph site was not one of the sites that I had in mind when I began the project. I'd never heard of it. I had heard of Petroglyph National Monument, which is in Albuquerque, but I had never heard of this place. So this was just kind of a, oh, you know what, we're in New Mexico, why don't we take a look? One of the most spectacular and splendid archaeological sites that I have ever seen. It is an amazing petroglyph site. 10,000, 20,000 pieces of rock art, depending how you count them, all dating to about AD 1300. There is a Pueblo site nearby, and it's believed that the folks who lived there were among the people who produced the rock art. And it's these large volcanic boulders that have had that dark surface etched into by pecking for the most part. And lots of images of bighorn sheep and birds and mythical creatures and geometric forms. And they're just spectacular. And it's an amazing place. There's a bighorn sheep, one of the important sources of protein. The image on the left is one of my favorite pieces of rock art. It's a bighorn sheep with this very interesting body design. And it's got 1, 2, 3. It's got at least 3 arrows embedded in its body. 2 on its back and 1 in its just below its throat. The image on the right is often called Tlaloc. Tlaloc is the rain god in Mesoamerica. So that's several hundred miles away, but those large eyes tend to be a dead giveaway. Well, certainly there's interaction between the people of the Southwest and the people of the Aztecs and the Toltecs and the Mixtecs, maybe the Maya as well. And so that's not terribly surprising. People in the Southwest, people at Chaco, have captive macaws that were, the DNA of the bones is clear, was brought in from Costa Rica. There's copper in places like Chaco, traded in from the South. And the folks to the South in Mesoamerica have turquoise that almost certainly was traded from New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California. So there's movement back and forth. There's trade back and forth with the direct or indirect. It's uncertain. So it's not terribly surprising that an important god figure, an important spirit of Mesoamerica is being adopted or embraced by the native people of New Mexico. And there are interesting images of a bird on the left and another bird on the bottom left. On the right, that stair step design, modern Hopi people will tell you that that's a rain cloud. So this bird may be symbolic of a rain cloud coming to water their crops, because these folks are agricultural. I love this image. There's a footprint. There's a really interesting bird. And the lower left is some creature whose identity I can only guess at, but really, really cool. And that's several feet across. Now, this is not from North America. You probably recognize this. This is one of the ground drawings, the geoglyphs in Peru. Well, we actually have our own version of that here in North America. And this is in Blythe, California. They're called the Blythe intaglios. Were all provided these. It's this great story how we were there and I was trying to take pictures on the ground. And as we're leaving, this woman and her husband are walking towards me with about the sweetest looking drone setup you can possibly imagine. Her name is Desi. I started talking to them. Desi was so kind to take pictures and share of the geoglyphs and to share them with me. That one in the bottom there, that person, that anthropomorph, is 180 feet from his feet to his head and 120 feet across. The Bureau of Land Management manages around the imagery. The background is a 4-footed animal. Maybe it's a panther. Yeah, that's Desi's image, this geometric design, and then looks like a horse, but they didn't have horses. This is probably 1500 AD, 1000 AD. Canyonlands National Park, Horseshoe Canyon in Utah. Again, some of the most spectacular rock art you're ever going to see. It's quite a hike. This one's a little bit of a challenge, but it brings you to the Great Gallery, which is absolutely astonishing. It's the length of a football field, and those individual images are 5 or 6 or 7 feet tall from their bottoms to their tops. And they appear to all painted onto those surfaces. And they're just amazing. Worth the hike. Dogs and bighorn sheep, and then these spirit beings. Now, I'm going to get a little closer to home here, folks. Again, this is not the United States. This is Egypt, when they moved those images from Abu Simbel, when they built the Aswan Dam. These things were all going to be inundated, so whole lot of money, whole lot of effort went into carving them out of the cliff and moving them to higher ground. Well, the state of Washington did much the same thing when they built a dam across the Columbia River. This is, I assume some of you recognize, well, there's Mount Hood, so you recognize this. Columbia Hills Historical State Park, which is in the rock art is north of the Columbia River. So here's a little bit closer image of it. And finally here, what you're looking at is a bunch of rock art, and I'll show you the individual pieces, that had to be removed from from being in situ, from their original location, because the water level of the caused by that dam was going to inundate that rock art. So they removed it. That is a historical photograph of one of the images that they had to remove. It looks like a beautiful, it's a rock art. It's a cat, perhaps. And there it is today, having been removed from its original location. So there's a little trail that takes you by a bunch of these. However, there still is some rock art in situ, including one of the most beautiful images I have ever seen. Now, maybe this is not news from the front. You've all seen this or heard of this, but this is the amazing story of She Who Watches. The story being that a great chief her people lived along the Columbia River, was concerned about what would happen to her people when she died. And she would walk the hills every night, and Coyote saw her. And Coyote's, I don't know that Coyote's a bad guy necessarily, he's a trickster. And Coyote wondered what was wrong, and she told him, I don't know what's going to happen when I die. I love being chief, but I can't live forever. And Coyote said, I can make it possible that you can watch over your people forever. Coyote's always playing tricks. She agreed, and what he did was he took her soul and he embedded it in the rock. And it was only the next day when people began looking for their chief, that a small boy looked up and said, there's something up there that wasn't there before. And they all ran up and they recognized the face of their chief in that piece of rock art. And they call it Sagaglalal, which in their native language means she who watches. And this is one where you need a ranger to take you there, because they're very protective of it, as well they should be. It's just absolutely spectacular piece of art, and it's sacred art. It's a piece of ceremony and tradition and culture, and it's open to the public with some guide. And I highly recommend it. It's pretty close to where you guys are, relatively close. Bears Ears is the most recently named national monument. It was named by Obama. It was one of the last things, his last acts. It is in southeastern Utah. I'm not going to, no intention of getting political, but this is the place that President Trump eviscerated. He took this 1.7 million acres and he cut it down to practically nothing. And it's in the courts. So it's argued that Native people want desperately the Navajo and the Ute tribe and the Hopi and a number of other groups, the two different versions of Utes, of the Utes, would very much like this to be the Zunis as well, to be a national monument. So that's still in process, but that's the original boundaries. Again, cut back substantially by President Trump, but we now have a Native American who is the head of the National Park Service. And so maybe that's going to change. Maybe this will be put back in place. All of this land was federal land in the first place. There was no power grab. They weren't taking land away from private people. They were merely acknowledging that this area deserves recognition and greater level of protection. And I couldn't agree more. There's amazing, oops. Yeah, I throw this in because I'm here in the Northeast. Everybody, all the towns are really proud of how old they are. When you go to Bluff, which is the corner of Bears Ears, established 650 AD. So I like that. It's kind of in your face, New England. We were here 1,000 years before you were. And the Navajo and the Hopi certainly were, and the Utes. And the area is absolutely gorgeous. And there are cliff dwellings, and there are amazing rock art panels. This is Lower Butler Wash, which, again, if you hire a Navajo guide, you can do a float down the San Juan River. There are only like one or two parts that are really scary. I canoe on a very still river, and when the guide told us, well, there's this place called 8 Foot Rapids, We thought it was 8 feet long. That's the problem. He meant it was an 8-foot drop, which is a canoe in a river that's absolutely flat. But it was worth it. It was worth it to be taken to places like this, with this absolutely stunning rock art that's probably more like 3,000, even 4,000 years old. This is called the Wolfman panel, with birds and these interesting images on the right. Not exactly sure what those are. Anthropomorphs, that is, they look like humans. Our Navajo guide in Chaco Canyon told us that where the handprints are located, that means to the ancestors, the ancient ones, something important happened in this place, at this place. And I like to think that this is in the Canyon de Chelly. I think that's kind of an important message to leave for all of these places, that in all of these instances, we're talking about places where something important happened. And it's still happening. These are not dead places. These are places where, I guess you can say, the spirits still reside. The spirit of Native American culture, Native American art, architecture, astronomy, calendars, and art, and their ability to live in the landscape and to produce these, and that, as again our Navajo guide, Mr. Harris, indicated, that while these places, in his estimation, belong to the Native people and the descendants of those Native people, it's a place that he, as a person, and I think he's speaking for a lot of the members of his group, of his tribe, that this is a place that they want people to come and see. They don't want people to have stereotypical images of Native Americans, not Hollywood images or TV images, but to know that these were and are vibrant cultures maintained over thousands of years, and that, yes, important things happened here. And we, as Native or non-Native, can come and see these places and appreciate their enormous beauty and their enormous significance and their enormous spiritual content. When I visited the Great Gallery at in Horseshoe Canyon in Canyonlands National Park, it was really interesting. It's a long hike, so not many people go there. But one of the things that I noticed is my wife and I were walking, and we were talking and chatting it up. It was a beautiful hike, kind of strenuous, but talking, and we saw from a distance the rock art. And as we approached it, there was no sign saying silence. There was no sign saying keep it down. We just kind of naturally felt we were in the presence of something sacred. And our inclination was to speak in hushed tones. And there was a park ranger there to protect these places. And we mentioned that to him, and he said, that's funny, that's very typical, that he hears people coming from a great distance, talking, chatting, having a good time, laughing. But as soon as they walk into the alcove where the art is, they get quiet. And it's a recognition of, yep, something important happened here. And something important is still happening here. And that's kind of overwhelming feeling almost of importance, significance, and a joy in being able to participate in that by being there and seeing it. These pictures are, I enjoy looking at these pictures. I hope you did too, but I'll tell you, there's nothing like actually being there to engage in the art, the architecture, the science, the true beauty of these places. And so I'll end with a picture of the book, in which I hope that there are people out there, and I actually know this is true because I'm on Twitter and I have Twitter friends who have book, and I get feedback from people who say, oh, you know, Ken, I drove cross country and I use this book as a guide. Nothing makes me feel better than that. And I hope that y'all, maybe it's at a local library, take a look, and if it inspires you to see Sagaglalal and that Columbia Hill State Park, if it inspires you to go to the Southwest, or you're in the Southwest and to see Chaco Canyon and Mesa Verde, or if you're in the East to see Cahokia or to see Monk's Mound, to see Etowah, to see any of these places, then I'm really happy. I've done my job if I've been able to inspire y'all, to inspire you to personally engage in this amazing history, not prehistory, we'll call it of America. And I think that is my last slide. And now I hope some of that, most of it got through, and I would love to open the floor to questions. Any questions you got, I'll try to answer them. And it's telling me my internet connection. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say thank you. Yeah, thank you.
You're absolutely, you're welcome.
Many of us, many of us through OAS have actually visited that local site that you shared.
Isn't it amazing? It's really quite beautiful.
Yes. So got a couple people with their hand up. Claire, would you like to share or ask your question?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh, okay. I have to apologize because my computer crashed just when you were starting to talk about the Columbia Hills. And so I would really be...
Okay.
No, I don't expect you to restart everything. However, could you tell me exactly where it is so I can go and visit? So it's Columbia Hills?
Yeah, you know what? I can, if somehow I could get your email address, I can email you specific directions. It's on the north bank of the Columbia River. If you look up Columbia Hill State Park, Horse Thief Lake, it's near the Dales, if that rings a bell.
No,
but I can give you.
I'm pretty new to Portland.
All right, I can give you road directions that'll take.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
And Claire, I'm president, and I've been with Jim Kaiser out there a number of times. If you look in screenings, you can just call or email me, and I'll be glad to
okay, great.
Perfect.
Give you information there.
Yeah. And
it's a great site.
Yeah, I wanted to thank Professor Feather. Thank you for showing Cahokia. Not enough people know about Cahokia. I was there. It's a fantastic site. Like you say, it's in Collinsville, and it's really worth you know, we took I'm an anthropologist, and we took a day trip over there. That was not long enough, but it's such an amazing site. Thank you for showing it to us.
Yeah. Oh, you bet. Hey, when I behind the desk, how I could get to Cahokia, and his response was, "What?" He didn't know what I was talking about.
Yeah, I have a whole lot of things.
Oh, sir, there haven't been any Indians around here for years.
How about Thomas? You have your hand up, Thomas?
All right.
Yes. Does this work?
Yep, we're hearing you.
All right.
I hear you.
Hi, great talk, and I'm.
Thank you.
I appreciate it. Despite my vacation beard, I'm an airline pilot, and the Mississippian culture, Hopewell, Adena. I've made a real push from last May until present time. I've been going to sites, Moundville, Etowah, some smaller ones in Tennessee. And but one thing about the Southeast, I noticed that on my way to these sites, there'd be big brown signs, Civil War battlefield this way, Civil War battle site here. And I would have to, there wouldn't even be a sign for these fabulous archaeological sites until, the last little country road, and it would be this tiny little sign. All over the Southeast, these sites are, it's so pathetic and unfortunate that they're just completely overlooked. Nobody seems to know they're there. And I don't know if it's because of the Trail of Tears and Andrew Jackson running the genocide of the Indians in the Southeast or what, but even in Ohio, where they've got the Newark Earthworks and the Hopewell National Park, and like you mentioned, the Serpent Mound, and there's these fabulous sites, and they just seem to be, not to mention Cahokia, really overlooked. And I just kind of wanted to know your thoughts on, why, and maybe how to get more visibility. I don't know. Is it because we're ignorant Americans? I don't know.
I don't know. Brad Lepper is state archaeologist in Ohio, and he works for the Ohio Historical Society, which is a semi-state agency. And their budgets keep getting cut back and cut back and cut back, and so they end up having to highlight just a few of the sites. The worst example in Ohio is there's this gigantic mound enclosure with mounds inside, and it's a sacred site to Native people. And today it's the site of a 9-hole golf course. It's called the Mound Builders Country Club, and they have this long lease on the property, and Native people are enraged and they protest every once in a while. But it's the equivalent of taking, I don't know, big cemetery or Arlington Cemetery and putting a golf course over it. You got to work through the gravestones. It's tragic, but it's symptomatic of the lack of respect that Native people have long had. If Cahokia is named a national park, that might lead to a bigger website, more funding, maybe better. It's really hard to tell. I hope that a book like mine can overcome some of that. But all right, maybe there's no sign there, but here's how you get there, and here's what you're going to see when you get there, and it's worth the trip.
Oh yeah, I totally agree. That golf course you mentioned was the Newark.
Thank you so much.
Part of the Newark Earthworks, and I know they're trying to get UNESCO World Heritage status.
Yes,
and they're running into problems with it because of the golf course. And there's a small. That's the majority of the remnants of the Newark Earthworks, and there's also a small circle and a little corner of a square that's left after all these years. Most of it's just been plowed and bulldozed.
Yeah, the mounds were seen as an impediment to agriculture, and so they were not. A lot of them were knocked over, and a lot of the artifacts that ended up scattered all over the place. The objects.
Yeah. Well, I could talk about this all night, but I'll let somebody else ask.
Yeah, me too.
Thank you.
All right.
Oh, absolutely. You're welcome.
We did have some questions come through the chat. So Grace asks, how were you able to narrow down to just these 50 sites?
Oh, that was really difficult. And I actually probably visited 100 sites, and it was a doable number, and it was tough. I wanted to get good geographic spread, but I wanted sites, and I didn't want sites where you had to be like a professional mountain climber to get to, or you had to hike 25 miles, because most people aren't going to be able to do that. I'm not going to be able to do that. So it was a mix of, well, these sites are really impressive. These sites are relatively easy to get to. These sites are maybe emblematic of a time period or a style or of a culture. And if I sit down again and do it, I might come up with 50 different sites. So it was tough. There were times when I was flipping a coin.
All right. And the next question from Grace is, do you include the history of how some of these sites became protected areas?
Not so much in this book. I'm working on a book specifically about national parks and national monuments. And yes, in that book, I'm going to focus a lot on, all right, how did these get, because in some of these cases, these lands were taken from the Native people. They were not open
Mhm.
wilderness. They weren't wilderness. They were people's backyards. They were native homelands. And so there's a kind of tragic history behind that. But in this book, my chief focus was to emphasize how amazing these places were and how everybody should go and visit them and learn about them for themselves.
All right. And another question is, are you working on a second book focused on Ancient America series of the next 50 sites?
Well,
Enjoyed the first one.
Yes and no. There actually is a second book already out, but it's not about 50 more of these important Native American sites. One of my interests for a long time has been archaeological frauds and fakes. And so I have a book called Archaeological Oddities, which is again a travel book of 40 places in the United States that are not genuine archaeological sites, but are presented as such. And some of them are humorous, some of them are funny, some of them are absurd. Rock art depicting pterodactyls in the Southwest and colonies of ancient Celts in New Hampshire. And these are all famous places. These are all places that generates tourist dollars, but they're places that I think could be interpreted differently. And then the third book is the book focusing on national parks and national monuments, which includes some of the sites from this book, but also expands it to a bunch of other places. So that's in the works. That if it hadn't been for COVID, that book would be out already, but there are some trips that I still need to take to finish that book up.
Okay, I'm taking care of you.
Christine, did you have a question?
No.
Okay, it's all right. All right, we'll go back to the chat. So another question in the chat is, I assume there is ongoing archaeological work at some of these places you have in your book. You mentioned that if it is, and how people can support it and get involved.
You know, in a lot of these places, especially in the Southwest, a lot of the work involves stabilizing places. I mean, these are places where there's always going to be some archaeology, especially when there are places that are falling over. There's going to be stabilization as well. I mean, for me, it's by tier for the rangers to take you around. That's an important way to support them, I think. And then, there are places like the Archaeological Conservancy that actually they find archaeological sites and they buy them out of development and preserve them through construction. You get the saving of some of these places. And support those folks who are working for the National Park Service who are serious under fund. They make sure that Congress people recognize the fact that there's a constituency maintained properly and deserve to be protected and preserved. And call your congressperson or write, send them an email or send them a text and let them know, hey, there are a lot of us folks here in Oregon who really think that these places should be preserved. How it works.
All right, well, thank you. And someone is asking for you to please provide directions on how to purchase your book.
If I send the little pamphlet coupon to Paula, can she then distribute it by email to folks with it's got a phone number, an address, how much it costs, shipping, 30% discount? Does that work for you?
Yes, I can get it to who I need to get it to.
Well, if
Oh,
I'm not
yep,
sure I
that
have the
works.
question. Okay,
We're all good.
I'll send it to Paula and then you guys figure out how to get it to the members. Be great.
Awesome. All right. So does anyone else have any more questions? All right. Well, Dr. Fair, I would like to thank you very much for your time this evening.
You know
It
what?
was highly enjoyable.
I like this stuff so much. Even if you guys weren't listening, I probably would have been talking to myself about it. So thank you for providing me with a wonderful
Love
audience.
it.
I had fun. I had great fun. And I'll make sure I get that information out to y'all.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you.
welcome.